So, this week we have been watching a fantastic film from 1974 called Thunderbolt and Lightfoot. It's a bit of a classic. It stars Clint Eastwood, Jeff Bridges. It's also got Jeffrey Lewis and George Kennedy in it. It's a very, very famous film in terms of, being a classic 70s Clint Eastwood number. It was directed by Michael Cimino, who is probably best known for his work on The Deer Hunter. Great American director there. This was his debut film. So as we have spoke about on the podcast here over several episodes over the past couple of months, people's debut films tend to be a little bit, they have fantastic elements, but they also have elements as well that are maybe telling that they are debut features. This is no exception, but it is a great film. Dave, you hadn't seen it before. I insisted you watch it, being that avuncular type of person that I am, and so you gotta see it, man. I always loved Thunderbolt and Lightfoot. I always had a special place in my heart for those, because some of the Clint Eastwood movies, I can take them or leave them. But Thunderbolt and Lightfoot was a special one, I think, because although it wasn't Jeff Bridges' first film, it was the film that sort of broke him. It was the film that sort of, propelled him to stardom, so to speak. And I just found his performance in it is really fantastic. It is a Clint Eastwood vehicle. It's a Clint Eastwood production. It's a Malpaso production, which is his production company. Cimino, debut director, first time out of the stable for him. Wouldn't be the last. He is a great director. And there's something about the film that smacks of the era. It is, in a sense, a new Hollywood film, which wasn't typical of Clint Eastwood films of the 70s. So in that way, I find it's kind of a unique Clint Eastwood picture. So just to briefly go over the story, at the start, we see Clint Eastwood, who appears to be a preacher or a priest, because you get these lovely shots at the beginning of this church in the middle of nowhere, all these expansive vistas, and Clint Eastwood's character is given a sermon. So straight away you're thinking, hang on, this Clint Eastwood film and he's a priest. What? He's usually a cop or a sheriff or a cowboy or a badass, and he's up there in this pulpit and he's giving a sermon. So you're thinking, geez, what's going on here? But it doesn't take long until the bullets start flying. And there's some crazy hitman trying to blast him in the middle of the church. And he escapes into the field. He runs off into this field. So you're thinking, oh, what's going on here? Why is this guy shooting at a priest? There must be more to it. And then he bumps into Jeff Bridges' character, who is Lightfoot. His name's Lightfoot. And he's just stole a car. We've just seen him briefly basically go into a car dealership. He sits in a really nice Trans Am car. The guy sort of says to him, I don't think you can handle a car like this. Is almost tempting him to buy it, and then he just just drives off like, this is my car now. But he bumps into Clint Eastwood almost quite literally, because he ends up bashing into that guy who's been trying to kill Clint Eastwood. So the two of them get together. And there we have the start of a great buddy movie, also a great road movie. What else should I say about it that sets it up? Maybe you want to take over. I feel like I'm doing all the work here.
That's it. I think that sets it up. The setup for going on a journey together of discovery.
They are criminals. We should say they are career criminals.
Yeah, career criminals. It's a very interesting film. It was inspired by Easy Rider. Clint Eastwood seen Easy Rider and wanted to make a film.
Absolutely, that's what I mean like about it being New Hollywood.
In New Hollywood, and so it was very much his attempt at that to come together with this. It's a great film. It's a great road movie, and but even it's great action. But beyond all that story and action, ultimately, the core charm of the entire film is that it's a character piece.
Yeah,
it's about Clint and Jeff, and their performances are fantastic. Jeff steals the show, and it's amazing how young he is to steal the show.
Yeah,
but their relationship that is like brothers or father and son, or you know, like some kind of mentor that starts cold and gets warmer with each other is
well, it's
incredibly...
funny. It starts cold because Clint Eastwood is always that cold guy, isn't he? He's got no emotion. He's a tough guy. He's like doesn't have any friends. He doesn't have any commitments to anyone but himself. But Jeff is so tenacious in wanting to hang out with him, wanting to be his friend. He does warm Clint up. You're absolutely right. It sort of warms up, and Clint does warm to him. You know, by later on in the picture, he's like very protective of him and stuff. So
exactly, and the journey you're going on with them, and that's the real. You could forget everything else, and that's the bit that is interesting. Yeah, and you know, ultimately, there's a sad ending to that relationship.
Yeah,
and it's much like Midnight Cowboy. I was sat at the end, tears in my eyes, going.
That's it, man.
You know,
first time you see it, you just don't. You know, in a sense, it sounds terrible, but you'd rather Clint got croaked it and Jeff gets away with the money, and you think, oh well, Clint, you're a bit older, you've had more of a life, and
it's so sad
you
because
finally met your match. But
at that moment, you're like, Clint's finally come round. They are really together at this point.
Yeah.
They've finally kind of found each other, really, because
he even goes and buys the white Cadillac. Yeah, that Jeff's character has been fantasizing about, and in that sense, it is exactly like Midnight Cowboy, because by the end of Midnight Cowboy, John Voight's character is really warmed to the Dustin Hoffman character.
Yeah, and
so it's very similar in that way.
It is very similar, and I think as well, you're thinking both these characters, you know, at the start of the film, as we kind of get to introduce them, are loners. People have been wandering around, not really knowing what to do in life.
Drifters.
And finally found each other. Yeah. And that's the kind of beauty of it. It's like, oh, finally these guys have found each other, and that can, you know, make themselves better. And then it's kind of all ripped away, you know, and it's heartbreaking. And
it's the ending it needs, though, you know, for them to just drive off in that Cadillac, everything's fine at the end. It just wouldn't be the same film.
But that's what they do now, I would argue, and it would ruin it.
Exactly. Whereas you need that bittersweet ending. It's more true to life. It's, you know, just as people attain what they have been seeking, and then it's all taken away from you. The rug's pulled out from under you, and it's, you know, it's very much like life. Yeah. But like you say, Jeff Bridges, what a performance. This was his sort of breakthrough picture. And I remember seeing an interview with him where he was, you know, he was full of vim and vigor, and he was trying to prove himself, and he's working with this established star, Clint Eastwood, in this big picture. And he's trying to do, you know, take after take after take. And Eastwood apparently is one of these guys, he just likes to do one take, maybe two, if you need it.
Yeah, 2 or 3 takes, and then off,
Yeah, apparently Bridges I want to try another take, I want to try this, I want to try that. And to be fair, he said Clint Eastwood was really understanding about it, and obviously thought a lot of him, and he says, well, let's let the kid do another one, you know, and that kind of thing. He was just like, you know, he just let him have it.
Nice.
It is nice, because that ultimately produced that larger-than-life, wonderful performance from Bridges. He lights up the screen. As soon as you see him, he's got those leather pants on. He's thrown his jacket over his shoulder. He's got this swagger. He's got the blonde hair. He's got the youthful, cheeky look about him. And you just think, who is this guy? Who is this character? I want to know more about this guy. And like I say, within 2 minutes, he's ripping the car off.
And ultimately, you know, Jeff, very young and handsome here, but also a fantastic woman in the film.
That scene where he says, well, I'd take a shot at myself. He looks in the mirror and he catches himself. You sexy bitch.
I was thinking,
just like, brilliant.
That looks pretty good for, you know, a man and woman's clothing, doesn't it?
He certainly has good legs, doesn't he? You know?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, you sexy bitch. I even go with you myself.
I mean, there are elements that anchor it to the time. That whole scene near the start where they pull the women, he takes the women back. I think Catherine Bach is one of them. She was like in the Dukes of Hazzard series later on. Daisy Duke. She was famous for being Daisy Duke. Very attractive, like supermodel type. And anyway, they take these two. Jeff takes the both of them back, doesn't they? And it's like one for you, one for me. And there's that whole scene. To be honest, rewatching that back in a modern context, looking at it, it was very dated. But, it wasn't terrible either. I've seen much worse of those sort of scenes from years later in the 80s, so it wasn't awful. It was just a bit
of both. It was a bit of there's a bit of realism to it, but then there's a bit of it's a little bit awkward, but it's reflective of the time, and I think there's a lot in the film that's reflective of time, and it's quite a strange one because you're kind of like just post 60s, just starting 70s, so it's in between this kind of Americana feel, and it's very pretty looking and lots of interesting things.
I see it as a Western as well because they are drifters, they are ex-war veterans, so it's like that trope of Westerns. They fought in the Civil War and now they're in the Badlands of the Wild West and they've become outlaws. And it's kind of like championing that whole American ideal of the outlaw, the tough guy, all of this sort of stuff. The beloved rogue, in a sense. There's some very nice cinematography in the film. I think some of those shots are really beautiful. Some of the vistas, as I say at the start, it really sets the tone. You've got all that Montana background, with the mountainous sort of forestry and a really nice kind of sunny look to the picture. There's some really nice shots in there where you can tell Cimino's really trying to prove his salt as a director as well.
Yeah, and I think he did a very good job of that because it's quite an expansive film and with lots of different visuals.
Yeah.
I mean, the other one to give a massive kind of shout in the film to is George Kennedy, who, as Red, is a real bastard. He really is.
I mean, George Kennedy was one of these actors. He plays a bastard really well. I mean, if you remember him in Cool Hand Luke, at the start, he's like almost the opposite in this because at the start of Cool Hand Luke, he's a real son of a bitch and he's horrible to Luke, Paul Newman's character, but he ends up being his best friend and he loves him, Whereas in this one, he's not very nice at the start, but he kind of warms up a bit and he's all right, even though he's being horrible to Jeff and stuff. But you start to think, well, maybe he's not so bad. And then, no, he is an arsehole. But he plays it so well. But
when he gets his comeuppance with the dog, I was like,
that Doberman. And I love that shot as well, where you see the cops looking through that glass door, and it's almost like they're going, "See what happens, Larry.
Serve yourself.
See what happens when you fuck a stranger in the ass." That bit where he finally catches up with them, and he's like, in the back of the car when they're having the ice cream. And they take him to that place and they make him get out of the car. And then he has a punch-up with Clint. And straight away, Clint just starts socking him. He's like, dodges a punch and wellies him in the back of the head. I was just thinking, you're in trouble here, Red. Clint's going to box your ears for you.
Don't want to mess with Clint. He has to be the tough one.
Yeah.
Clint's not dying.
No, exactly. Clint Eastwood doesn't die. I don't think, has he ever died in a picture? He probably has, but I can't
Probably
recall.
has, but yeah.
It's probably just
rare.
once,
Yeah.
But I mean, a classic film. So glad you've seen it now. And really even more glad you enjoyed it,
Yeah, I think it's very enjoyable. There's this bit you could kind of go, well, trim this or tighten that. But I think it's a really great film. And for a first film as well, terrific, one of the best first films, really, I've come across, actually.
But there we go. Another one under your belt. You can add that to your watch list. It's, another classic there. If you're a youngster and you haven't seen Thunderbolt and Lightfoot, you might want to check it out. It's a great buddy movie. It's a great road movie. If that's not your thing, what the fuck are you doing listening to us talking about it, man?
Exactly. Highly recommended.
If you have enjoyed this video, please consider supporting us at buymeacoffee.com or join us on Patreon. All links below.